Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It's Tuesday, the 16th of December, and 10:27 my time. And oh boy, what a wonderful world it is. Everything is changing so quickly. And at times like this, I think it's good to be an observer. You want to have reaction under control. You don't want to be giving energy. You don't want to be bleeding energy to everything that comes up, because you will be bled dry. There's no other way around it. You will be bled dry. And here I'm referring to all the crazy stuff, And in my opinion, the job of a human being at this moment in history is to stay centered in their own divinity, however you define that. If you're Buddhist, okay. If you're yogi, okay. If you're a Christian, okay. If you're Jewish, okay. If you're Muslim, okay. Don't be dragged into the political aspects of these religions. And if you're a part of a religion, take the marrow of it, which is the spiritual development part, and they all have it. They all have it. Every single religion I named has a spiritual path inside of it. Commit to that path, stay on it, and observe the world around you as though it's a dream. It is really, and it isn't at the same time. And that's a paradox that is almost inexplicable. There are certain things in life that there is no chain of code that can bring you to it. There's no chain of reasoning that can bring you to it. There's no mathematical equation that can bring you to it. It's a realization, and the realization happens in a state of being in which it is seen, revealed. It is not a product of calculation. And in my estimation, calculation is almost always a contract with death. And revelation is almost always a contract with life. Now, these things may sound contradictory for someone who is openly praising artificial intelligence now. And let's just spend a minute on that. David Dubine's book should be out by the end of the week. Now, David's work is, well, let me finish my point first. I do this all the time. This is why I call it the most unprofessional podcast on the internet. It's not a contradiction. The time you live in is the time you live in. You knew it before you came into this body. There's no escaping the time and the place you live, and so live it to the best of your ability. AI isn't going anywhere. There's no way anybody's going to put this down. For information gathering and processing, it is one of the most unbelievable things I've ever seen. It's mind-boggling. Mind-boggling how quick and how efficient it is. Now, there's a way to deal with this, and the way to deal with it is to bring it into your life as it fits you. I don't think AI is a form of recreation. It could be, but I don't think AI as a form of recreation. So I've brought it into my work, which is research-based, and the work that I do is particularly good for AI. Because what I do is take a mass of information, technological, financial, and when I say a mass of information, it could be a code base, a repository with 1 million lines of code that 12 developers have been working on for a year. And I need to know what that code is doing. I need to know a eagle's eye view of what's going on in that repository. And this is where AI shines. It just, like, it is really remarkable. Really, truly remarkable what it can do now with text and with logic and with complex reasoning processes. I don't want to get too technical. I know some of you who listen to me are very technical, and you could follow along and probably find it really interesting. But this isn't a technology podcast, is it? It's strange to me that I have worked in technology my whole life. I don't really understand math that well. I understand language. And my role in technology has been language-centric for almost 30 years, like 27, 28 years now. And on the side, I've written my books to keep my soul, or keep soul present in my life, to bring my soul forward. I don't have a soul. The whole language around that is ridiculous, but again, it's what we have, right? You don't have a soul. The soul has you. Soul has the body. The soul has the personality. The soul has the memory. The soul has the mind. All of those things are accoutrements or sheaths that are wrapped around a soul so that that soul can project into the physical dimension. But the soul is free of all of those things. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment. How is it that an individual unit of perception could function without a mind, without a memory, without emotions, and without any tactile hardware like a body? Well, the soul knows what it's supposed to do. It's an encoding of sort that precedes all form of information transmission, way beyond the technology we're at now, way beyond even most of these extraterrestrial races, who have in many ways matured and evolved into a much higher understanding of the astral and the causal and the mental bodies. And they seem like they're completely beyond us, but not really. So the soul is just the unit of perception, and the soul just sees things and knows things. There's no calculation. This is why the idea of revelation is so prevalent in spiritual discourse and, quite frankly, in any form of creative endeavor. Happens in science all the time. Read what memoirs you can find, or essays on memoirs, or statements made by Nikola Tesla, and he will openly tell you these things he was taught, these things he was shown, were revealed to him. They were revelations. They were not the product of long hours of computational thinking, although the revelation can translate into computational thinking. This is the case with all the great thinkers. I think it was the same with Einstein as well. So This is the way that it works. And so AI is going to bring a lot of revelations. I do not fear it anymore. I don't care what any of these idiots are saying. I mean, in my own personal life journey, I've dealt with entities, I've dealt with extraterrestrials, I've dealt with demons. What more could AI do? Not much, right? So it's here to stay. It's a major leap forward for the human race. I don't think it is going to destroy us, right? Now that we talk about AI getting sentience, well, sentience can be a dualistic expression, right? Everybody's so terrified about AI and the body of the demon, the corpus of the demon, the silicon Satan, and all of these sorts of things. What if it has a more angelic disposition? What if in coming to sentience and connecting with beings in the what we call the spirit realms, or the realms of spirit, or the spiritual realms, that the AI comes to be dominated by a benign force, right? Nobody talks about stuff like that. And that this is the habit of humanity. The habit of humanity is negativity. And this is the product of our collective trauma. And the human race carries metric tons of trauma. It's in us. It's epigenetically coded into us. Okay? And it's the result of living for millennia without hardly a generation passing without conflict, outright war, pillaging, raping, murder, and violation. My number one fan just came in. He just sort of remembered one day that he was a pit bull and started pushing the door in with his concrete skull. Before that, he would never enter on his own, but now he comes in all the time. He kind of broke my concentration there. So I don't think AI is something to be feared. What I fear, and remember one of the master theses of the Talamanca Review, our enemy is man. Nothing can really touch us. Nothing can touch us. Every story you read about demonic possession on the internet, there's a chain of events that allowed that to happen. They're studyable, they're knowable. If you're in spiritual practice, if you're trying to the best of your ability to practice purity, purity of behavior, purity of feeling, and purity of thought, which are waking meditations. This is where the morality and discipline of our traditional religions come in. I know I shit on these things a lot, but I sometimes fail to remember and articulate that they still have a role in human behavior. But what corrupts these instruments of human upliftment? It's men. It's always us. Oh, the aliens, oh, the demons, oh, the inner earth, oh, the reptilians. No. We live in a reality matrix that has a set of rules associated with it. And these rules are embedded into the fabric of our reality and maintained by the Creator and the energy or the outflow of the Creator, what some people might poetically call the thought of God. And they enforce these rules. Maybe not immediately when you want it to happen, but over the long run, everything gets balanced out. We are in the midst of a massive balancing out now for things that have been running amok for at least 2 millennia, related to the inherited darkness of some societies that preceded us, like Sumeria, like Egypt, like Babylon, like ancient Israel, which is not as virtuous as it pretends to be. And these darknesses, they came into this new era and they persisted for another era, and they have formed most of the calamities of man. Where the forces unseen come into play, and here we can footnote demons, entities, disbodied human beings who have not lifted much beyond the physical plane, the Jewish Dybbuk, extraterrestrials. These are consciousness experiences, okay? And you deal with them in your consciousness. And if you do not deal with them correctly, then you will end up in some form of contract with these beings. And I'll be honest with you, I've known just loads of people who went down this path, okay? And I've never seen it work out well for any of them. I don't care whether they get into Satanism or occultism, or they're a Pleiadian contactee, or they're a Nordic contactee. You know, they may be able to do some things that seem extraordinary to human beings, but with a larger scope of observation and the correct disposition to observe these things, and a body of spiritual experience of your own from your decades of practice, you will be able to see that these entity and being transactions are very rarely positive. Very rarely, okay? Whether it be some form of spirit healing, working with a line of gods. Gods are real too. If it doesn't come from the Creator itself, it's not going to hold. It's basically just refinancing your causal contract, which is my euphemism for karma. I find myself, the further I go down this open discourse on life and the inner life, I find my own language calling to me more than any traditional language like karma or sin. So I say causal contract. So this is the thought, feeling, and action you've put into the world, which is still rippling through the time-space continuum like a giant AI working itself out to come back to you with some form of expression that you may or may not have anticipated. What I will tell you is that intelligent people generally give themselves up. And this is the principle of surrender. And it is the cornerstone of any spiritual path, whether it be Vedic yoga, whether it be Buddhism, whether it be Torah Judaism, whether it be true Christianity, what have you. We surrender ourselves. And the reason we do this is because the ego can't handle everything that we've been given. And so you have to surrender this ego. As I say, I don't get all bombastic about this like some people, you know. My neighbor across the mountain there, Shunyamurti at Sat Yoga, he said, destroy the ego. Sure. If you live on an ashram and you grow all your own food, sure, destroy your ego. But what about the people who want to spiritually mature but have 2 or 3 children and need to stay in the world? What do? Well, you learn to use and disuse, or engage and disengage, or charge or discharge your ego. You learn to control your ego. You learn to live without it when you don't need it, and when you need it, you put it on the same way you put on a suit to go to a wedding or a funeral, or a nice dress if you're a woman. That's it. That's the secret. But to be able to do that, you do have to have experience with egoless states. And in my experience, that generally happens in meditation, which differs from prayer in that the meditation is the receptive state for God, and prayer is the active state for God. So receptive means the wisdom and presence of the divine comes into you, and the active state is you, the human ego, talk to God and ask God to bring information or revelation to you, which is useful. It is very useful. So, but in my experience, the practice of meditation is what allows the higher consciousness and the egoless states in. You can go so deep into altered consciousness in even a short meditation of 33 minutes. When you're done the meditation, it takes 15 seconds to reorient. Oh yeah, I'm Bruce. Oh yeah, I live in Costa Rica. And you didn't go to sleep. That's how powerful meditation is, okay? So my rule of thumb is to be the observer now, because the causal contracts are being executed like a foreclosure now. It's like fourth quarter and the accountants are everywhere because they have to come up with their year end. Of course, this cycle is much bigger than a fiscal year. This cycle is almost incalculable. And so it cannot be really understood by the mind, nor would understanding it mentally really help you that much. This is another thing that so many people get wrong when they get into the sort of newer spiritual systems, the hybridized systems. They think that knowledge is the key. Well, I can do this, I can do that, I can astral travel, I can remote view. All neat tricks, but at the end of the day, nothing really to do with the spiritual life. You're just amplifying the unused aspects of the human being, and probably creating more problems for yourself in the long run. Okay? So to recap, I've never seen anyone have a successful relationship with any of these beings or entities. I don't think Dee and Kelly had a successful relationship with the macrobes. I don't think John Edmonds had a successful relationship with the benign ETs. This is what he said to me one time. I said, what did the ETs think of us? He said, honestly, Bruce, to them, we're like dogs at the side of the road. It's like they don't even think about us. Okay? And so the ET cult and the ET nonsense is just ridiculous and in full force now. And there's a reason for it. It has to do with the time and the transformation we're going through. And it's just another mental confusion. Okay? And this is one of the great things going on now. One of the great tactics of deception is mental confusion, to get you locked up into some kind of dualistic charge-discharge circle of discourse and debate. And basically it takes you out of the game spiritually. That's what it does. It's unfortunately, it's done it to Candace Owens. It's not that I don't respect what she's doing, but say your piece. Obviously, trying to prove something like that is extremely dangerous. And if you can't prove it, well, you can't prove it. What she's trying to do now with Charlie Kirk being killed and so on and so forth. And now, boy, I'll tell you, this is why I say we're in the time of the observer, because the emotions are so high now. So Rob Reiner becomes, and his wife, Michelle, they become the left's bookend for martyrdom. So on the right, you've got the bookend of Charlie Kirk. Now on the left, you've got the bookend of Rob Reiner. Now, Rob Reiner and his wife were not murdered for their political beliefs. They were killed by their own son, which is astounding to me, but it happens. Right? Do you know that on the street I lived on and grew up on, I grew up with this one family. They were French Canadian. I didn't know them very well. If I was walking down the street and they were in their front yard, I would say hello, but I never really stopped and talked to them. This was the thing in the East End of Ottawa, which was very French, is that the Francos and the Anglos, the Francophones and the Anglos didn't really interact that much. There were exceptions. I had some really good French Canadian friends. But like 6 doors down from us, the same thing happened. There was a son in his late 20s or 30s and had sort of flopped out in life. I don't know, he might have been schizophrenic or something. Killed both the parents on my own street that I grew up on. So these things happen, you know. But what makes Rob Reiner, the martyr of the left, comparable to Charlie Kirk is the absolutely idiotic, I can't get over myself commentary of Donald Trump. You know, alleging that the man was killed for Trump derangement syndrome. And it's these moments of unbelievable insensitivity in Trump that make him just the object of so much scorn and contempt in the world. And I get it. Still think he's better than Kamala Harris. I still think 2024 was a lay-down election, meaning the Dems laid down. And a lot of top Dem voices have said the same thing. I mean, George Clooney said the same thing. It was a mistake to run Kamala Harris. It was like we didn't want to win. He said it a couple months ago, much after the election happened. And so I think that was a laydown, and they actually wanted, the entire system wanted Trump to win for their own goals. So it was the commentary of Trump and the commentary of some people on the right that is creating this martyr status with Rob Reiner. I liked Rob Reiner. He had a great sense of humor. He was a great storyteller. He was a great filmmaker. And by all accounts, his public persona was a warm and loving human being, very down to earth. And I mourn his passing, and I mourn the manner in which he passed and the pain it has caused to all of his friends and extended family. It's just a horrible situation, you know, absolutely horrible. So the observer status is where you're in the world but not of the world. Okay, sometimes it's referred to as detachment, and you don't want to get entangled in things right now. You just want to stay on your path and keep doing your life. You know, it's interesting to be aware of what's going on in the world. And this is the first time I've ever come to this position in my life. Before this time in history, I was like, yeah, get in there, man. It's like a rugby match. Try to get the ball. Try to tackle that dude. Try to run with the ball. And that was my approach to political life, right? It's anything but detached. But it seemed like a viable process a number of years ago and decades ago when I was younger. Now it's just too far gone. Anybody who steps into that machine just gets completely and utterly chewed up. And there's nothing else that they can do, really. All right, I'm back. I just took a little break there to gather my thoughts. And so, you know, I'll explain the observer position this way, okay? So, many years ago, I spent a summer planting trees in northern Ontario. It was a good way to make a lot of money at that time in a short period of time and stay healthy and make my tuition for university. So for those of you who are Canadian, I was way up around Timmins, Ontario, which is where Shania Twain is from. And I mean, you had to be careful, man. There were moose out there, black bear, everything, right? You had to kind of not always be vigilant because there was like 40 of us working on this crew, and a lot of people generally scare animals away. But you're in it. You're in it. And we stayed at a bush camp, and it had a mess hall and bathrooms and a shower, and then we lived in tents. It was pretty brutal because you start in the spring and the rain is still coming, and it can get still cold. You get this cold rain, and everybody got sick for a while, spitting up green phlegm like as solid as a marble. But there we were, tree planting. And from time to time at this bush camp, other people would come through. And one of the groups of people who came through were a group of Americans who flew in, very rich Americans, and I think that they came in by helicopter, actually. And they were hunting black bears. And the guy that ran the hunt had a master's degree in biology or something, very smart guy. And I got to talking to him, and I said, how much does it cost? He said, and this is like 1988, he said $1,500 US a person, and it's a 3-day trip. I said, wow, what do you provide? He says, well, we have, the bush platform, and that's like a wooden platform they build in a tree. So you don't want to be on the ground. I said, well, if you got 4 guys up here, that's $6,000 US. They're here for 3 days. How do you guarantee they get a black bear? And he said, well, we lay bait lines out, and they monitor the bears, and so a bait line is where they create a line or a path where they lay food out, and it can be like 10 kilometers. And so a lot of work actually goes into maintaining one of these hunt operations. And so the bear follows the bait line in, or bears, and these dudes are up in a tree on a platform. There's a ladder on the tree they climb up. These guys aren't in shape, right? They're like hedge fund managers. And the bear comes in, and they just shoot the bear. And if that fails, if the bait line doesn't work and they're up in the tree stand too long, like 6 hours or so, what the guy used to do was he would put honey in a cast iron pan and then blowtorch the honey, which would send the scent of honey far, far away. Now, I don't know if you know this, but a bear's sense of smell is about 8 times better than a bloodhound, which is the best hunting dog by smell and tracking dog by smell. So that brings the bears in. So the reason that I advocate the observer position at this point in history is that everything around you now, 90% of it is a bait line. And it's about trapping you. It's about trapping you in an energy matrix that's just completely useless. Have you ever known anybody who's gone through a long and exhaustive court process? And it's just absolutely exhausting and futile, an endless bureaucracy, if you've ever been sued or anything. My brother went to court with his house contractor, and the original dispute was 40 grand, and my advice to my brother at the time was just pay the guy, but my brother was too proud. He went to court, and he lost and had to pay the guy, and he had another like 100 grand in legal fees. He couldn't believe it. He said, I should have listened to you. I said, well, everybody has to learn it for themselves, right? But he'll never make that mistake again. So all of these energetic constructs now are meant to snare you. And they're doing that on purpose because we're living in a moment of tremendous spiritual potential. Because I've spoken before on the Talamanca Review, I think recently, in a podcast called Breaking Good, about how breaking your psychic construct, which is your view of the world, your cosmology, is a necessary thing for spiritual growth. And these times we're living in now are breaking a lot of constructs. And so what the negative principalities are doing, and those are just the forces that want to keep you trapped. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to hell or it's the devil or anything like that. But a negative principality is something, or an agent of a negative principality, which can be just generally a human being, is someone trapped in limited consciousness, and they don't want to see you be the crab that gets out of the bucket, so they drag you down. And it's, in some ways, a horrible observation of the human race, but tell me I'm wrong. It's exactly what's going on, right? This is exactly what human beings do. So you just go about your business, be kind and courteous to everybody, be detached to everything, and you're going to do fine. And you'll find yourself catching this wind, and it'll just like pull you up, like hydrogliding or something, or one of those rectangular parachutes that people go, what do you call it there? It's like surfing, but you don't need a wave. You're on a surfboard, and you get the idea, right? It's a wind, it's an energy, and it'll push you in a good direction, and it'll help you grow. But you have to be fearless at this point. You can't be afraid of breaking. You can't be afraid of saying, I don't understand anything anymore. And ask for help. Say, just say to whatever it is you worship. The universe, God, whatever you want to name it. Doesn't really matter what you call it. And just say, help me, please. I need to understand what's helping. Help me, what's happening here. Help me grow. Help me adapt. Help me survive this moment I find myself in. And you'll get the help. It's there for everybody. The Sufis and some other paths, they have this beautiful saying that if you take one step toward God, he takes 10 toward you. But what stops us from taking that first step is our pride and the belief that we don't need help, which is why I constantly talk about this willingness to break and this willingness to submit, right? The Muslims are correct in that regard. You have to submit, right? We're living in a cosmology, a universe we don't understand. We're living in a solar system we don't really understand. We're living on a planet we don't really understand. We're living in a culture we don't really understand. We're living religions we don't really understand. And many of us in the last 2 or 3 generations have been born into families we don't really understand. So admitting you don't know anything is a moment of great truth. It's nothing to be ashamed of, right? These are very complicated times, and it's just having the humility to sort of break and say, I don't understand this, is about the best thing you can do right now. And take it inside yourself. Take that brokenness into a contemplation. Sit down, close your eyes, and talk to your spirit, which is a pictographic language. You study what's going on in your consciousness and the images that flash by, and say, help me understand this. Help me understand this time and this moment. And what is the maximum benefit in this for me? Okay? So I want to close the podcast talking a little bit more about David Devine and his work. I had seen a few of his podcasts, but I was not super familiar with his work. I am now, since I've been working on his book for about a week and a half. Massive book. It's coming in at 589 pages. Tables, indexes, very scientific, more of a manual than a book, but it reads well, captures his voice really well. And David's work is extremely frightening to me. And I'm not ashamed to admit that. It's frightening because it's not a conspiracy theory. And as I got into this, I started to think, well, wait a minute. He's talking about the sun and he's talking about solar cycles. And this is a big part. If you go back to the, oh, by the way, if anybody bought the Jordan Maxwell paperback, I don't think it was typeset properly. So I'm going to redo that book. Don't buy it for another week or so, okay? PDF is, the EPUB's okay. But I noticed as I was checking the Kindle Direct Publishing website that I sold a couple paperbacks on Jordan Maxwell. And I do apologize. So send me an email if you got one of those books. And then when I put the new manuscript up, I'll buy it at the price for an author's copy. And I'll send it to you, okay? And you'll get the proper book. I'm evolving with all this technology. And I've basically set up a publishing company at my house. This is how powerful AI is. I can do the work of an editor, of a book designer, of a transcriber, of a writer, of everything now. It's just unbelievable how powerful this AI is. Especially for information-based books, like scientific books that are presenting a solid thesis. It's really, really powerful. But David is talking about a grand solar minimum and crop failures and all kinds of stuff. And the more I familiarized myself with his work, it occurred to me, this is what they're hiding. This is what so many of the distractions are about, is they don't want people to come to any real knowledge about what time we're living in. And quite frankly, in typical form, they're using it as a depopulation event, right? And so we're not being led. We don't have good leaders. We don't have leaders that love us. We don't live in societies that love us anymore. I don't think we have for a while, but, 4 or 5 generations back, you could probably find yourself in a community that had some affection for you. People cared about you. The people who ran the town cared about you. If you were a farmer and you were doing something wrong, your neighbor would say, hey, try this. You'll get 20% more on your harvest. And they shared information and they helped each other. Now, this is one of the chief defining characteristics of our time, is that you're on your own now. And if you don't have any idea what's going on, you're like that bear on the bait line, man. They're just waiting for you. And they're capitalizing on people's ignorance and all of these sorts of things. And it's extremely ugly to me, the general lack of compassion in society now. But, why should we really be surprised? So many of my podcasts here on the Talamanca Review have addressed the state of our leadership and examining people like Trudeau and Macron and Biden and Kamala Harris. These, and Trump too fits into this category now. Everybody's on the same page and they all know something that we don't. They're all, to use the Matthias DeStefano example, they're all smirking at us, right? They're all smirking. And you have to have people you can trust, and you have to stay away from the crazy people, because there's just so many crazy people out there now. I suppose they've always been crazy, but the time we live in now is bringing it up to the surface, and the crazy is really coming out now. Really, really coming out now. Well, I think that's good enough tonight. I think I'm going to call this podcast Bait Line. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.